like if you had to pick like one thing that you're good at, like what's the most important thing? It seems to me to be wrestling, because the wrestlers can just, if you get like a real high level wrestler, they just dictate what happens. They dictate where the fight takes place. I don't think there is, I mean, you have to know how to strike. You have to know the other things as well. But I feel like if you have a pyramid of shit that's important, I feel like at the bottom is wrestling.
You may have noticed that I took down a video that I posted with Andrew Tate saying that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was totally useless. I took it down because I don't agree that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is totally useless. That's why I took it down. I think that was a bit harsh. I've always said that up to about blue belt, right? Maximum purple belt. But I would say, if someone asked me my opinion as to how far should they go in their studies of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, not rolling, roll forever, but how far should they go in their studies of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu concerning in regards to belts, I would say blue belt is it. Because most of the submissions that you see in the UFC at the highest levels, in fact, of MMA, are taught at blue belt and below. Okay. But I don't think Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is useless. What Andrew Tate said, I understood, but I think it was a bit over the top, and that's why I took it down. All right? It didn't reflect my honest opinion of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now I want to introduce you to a man by the name of Art Davies. Most of you have no idea who Art Davies is, but I happen to know who Art Davies is. Why? Because I was cross-training in 1976. Started wrestling in 1975. It had already been boxing from the age of 9 years old. Had started boxing in 1970. Got into karate around 1974. Started wrestling in 1975. And me and 4 other friends of mine who were in at least 2 of those martial arts started cross-training in 1976. This, in case you don't know, this was 17 years before the UFC. That's how long I've been cross-training. That's why I can say what I'm saying about the martial arts, whether people like it or not, or whether people believe that a black guy should know more than John Danaher about martial arts. Well, it's true. It is what it is. Let's look at Art Davies, and then after Art Davies, I'm going to show you something that Joe Rogan said, but I'm going to break down what he meant, but he didn't say, and what he did not want to say, okay, in regards to wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Art Davies, very quickly, so I don't bore you, because I know you're more interested and curious about what Joe Rogan said, and how, what he left out, okay. So, when we look at Art Davies, well, who was Art Davies? Art Davies was a partner of Rorion Gracie. Now, Art Davies is trying to get the UFC together, all the legal work, trying to help Rorion with the format of the tournament. He comes to the school where Rorion is, I believe it was Torrance, California, in the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu school. He comes there, and there's a mat to the back of Rorion. So the back, Rorion has his back to the mat, all right? And Art Davies is looking at the mat while he's talking to Rorion also. On the mat is Rickson Gracie grappling or rolling with Mark Schultz, wrestler Mark Schultz. Now, Mark Schultz is not scheduled to fight in the first UFC, but he's invited to the school by the Gracies. I don't know which one, but he's invited to the school by the Gracies just to roll with one of the Gracies. He ends up rolling with Rickson. Art Davies notices that it takes Rickson almost 40 minutes. Yes, almost 40 minutes just to get the arm of Mark Schultz. Almost 40 minutes to get just the arm of a wrestler, right? Mark Schultz is a wrestler, right? No Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at all, okay? Art Davies notices it, but Davies says he doesn't want to say to Rorion what's on his mind. And what he wants to say is this, and what he notices is this. He said to himself, when these wrestlers learn what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu needs to get a submission, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is going to be in trouble. This is what Art Davies says before the first UFC fight. He's looking at the mat. Rorion Gracie has his back to the mat, so Rorion doesn't see what's going on, right? Not that it would have mattered to him anyway, but he doesn't see what's going on. Art Davies is looking at Rickson, right? Because he can't help to glance at the mat because he's seeing the mat. The mat is right in front of him. So even though he's taking care of business, he's seeing the mat. He's looking at Rickson Gracie struggle with this wrestler who knows no BJJ. And Art Davies says to himself, when these wrestlers learn what BJJ needs to get a submission, BJJ is going to be in trouble. Great prediction, because for the last 20 years, that prediction has been a fact. For the last 20 years, 2 decades, there's a person who said they can't believe that in 2022, someone, meaning me, is saying that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is not the base of mixed martial arts. There's a person who came into my forum and said, I can't believe that in 2022, this man is saying this. Let me say this to you and everyone, including that man who said that. I can't believe that in 2022, after seeing gobs of MMA fights, that anybody believes that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is the #1 art that one should learn in mixed martial arts. I can't believe that that myth in 2022 is so strong that it is still going on. When clearly the top wrestlers, I have a list of wrestlers that are primarily wrestlers that came into the UFC wrestling and or dominated with wrestling and not Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. There is a list that is mind-boggling, right? That I will present to you in another video. But in 2022, no one who was serious about really studying, not doing, but studying the martial arts, right? And not even doing MMA, but studying MMA, believes that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is the king of the cage when it comes down to grappling arts. They cannot be watching what I've been watching. And they certainly don't know what I know, or can't know what I know has been the case for the last 20 years. Yes, 20 years. 2 times 10, 4 times 5. Right? 2 decades. Wrestling has dominated Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Art Davies, the partner of Rorion Gracie, predicted that in 1992. Predicted that a year before the UFC. Okay, I'm going to show you a clip of Joe Rogan saying something, right? And I'm going to tell you what he left out, because I've said the same thing he's trying not to say. The same thing Joe Rogan is trying not to say, I've been saying for 10 years. Here he is.
If I was going to say what discipline's the most important, I would say wrestling. Because if you can't keep a guy from taking you down, he's going to be on top of you, he's going to hold you down, he's going to punch you in the face. It's a giant advantage to be able to hold a guy down, to be able to punch his face in, and you can't really do much when the guy's on top of you. That said, from there, you have to understand jiu-jitsu, because if you don't, you could hold a guy down, then all of a sudden he wraps his legs around your neck and you're caught in a triangle and you go to sleep.
Okay? What did Rogan say? What did he say? Did he say you need to know Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Or did he say this?
You have to understand jiu-jitsu.
Okay? Joe Rogan said you need to understand Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You need to understand Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now, I constantly hear people say, well, wrestling needs to know Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. No. Wrestling does not need to know Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at all. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu needs to know wrestling, because Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu does not have good takedowns. Okay? But wrestling does not need to know Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And if there is any kind of benefit to learning anything about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, It is what Joe Rogan hinted at, but he didn't want to say. And that is, you don't need to know it, you need to understand it. That's it. You need to understand it. What does that mean? If a wrestler understands what a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist needs to get a submission, they don't have to study or learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu much at all. Okay? I'm going to say this again. What Joe Rogan hinted at, but he did not want to say because he has invested so highly in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. His heart is so attached to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, he slipped up. And he said something that only people like me can interpret. What he said is that a wrestler needs to understand Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. What that means is that he needs to know what makes Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu function like it does. That's it. Now that may mean that you're a wrestler and you roll with someone who knows Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It may mean that. In fact, I think that works like that. You should. Right? Because if you get caught in a submission, you need to know how he got it. Right? It may even mean that you may want to train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for a couple months. Right? A couple months. Maybe up to blue belt max. But it does not mean whatsoever that a wrestler needs to know Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He needs to understand Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And Art Davies knew it. And Joe Rogan knows it. But he doesn't want to say it. But he has to know it. Being a commentator of the UFC, he has to know it. And right there, he slipped up and said it. But he did not interpret for all you BJJ fanatics what he actually meant, because he probably knew that if he said that, then BJJ teachers would have been pissed with him. Because people like me have been saying it for 20 years. Wrestling is the #1 base in mixed martial arts and will always be. Wrestling, the dynamics of wrestling, the culture of wrestling, from the approach to cutting weight, the entire culture of MMA, the culture of MMA, the feeling of MMA is not Muay Thai. The feeling of MMA in a good MMA gym is not Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The feel you get when you walk into a good top-notch MMA school is not karate. The feeling you get when you walk into a really good MMA practice and top-notch fighters are practicing, it looks like a wrestling floor. Even when people are striking, it looks like a wrestling environment. Okay? Because that's what MMA, that is at the base of mixed martial arts, and I've been saying it for 20 years to BJJ fanatics. Okay? The fact of the matter is that what a wrestler needs to understand is how the major submissions, maybe at the most 6, the major submissions in MMA, the submissions, the most high percentage submissions that work no gi, the highest percentage of submissions that work no gi are about 6. If you look at MMA fights, if you look at MMA submissions, you will see that there's no more than about 6 that you see constantly. And those 6 can be taught and are taught at blue belt and below. If a wrestler knows those 6 submissions, knows what you need to pull them off, knows what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu needs to pull them off, but God forbid, knows how to do them, they don't need anything else. And this is what you see. When you see John Jones, Daniel Cormier, when you see Demetrius Johnson, when you see these people, when they first started getting the eye and started getting the attention of people, they were no more than a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Okay? The fact of the matter is that Joe Rogan hinted at something, and I've been telling you people for 20 years, if a wrestler understands Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu will continue to get dominated forever. Forever. Okay? It's a fact. Now that doesn't say Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is no good. What it does say is something that people don't want to realize. And that is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is essentially and was meant to be a gi art. A gi art. That is why there are at least 300 techniques in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that won't work no gi. Because you need the gi to pull them off. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a gi art. That's what it is. It's a gi art. Period. People started using no gi Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in set fights, in no holds barred matches. But originally, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a gi art, and that will always be the case. Therefore, in the cage, it is never going to be king of the cage, because wrestling will hold that title forever. And the reason is because, and will always be dominant over Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, is because of this. The culture of wrestling makes it so that it is aggressive, it is based on dominance, it is not based, and there's another thing that you're only going to get from me, is not based so much on technique, but on objective. A wrestler has a foundation of how to do things, a kind of skeleton or a template, to use a better term, on how to get things done. They follow that general template, but the idea is to accomplish a particular goal, to take you down using by whatever means necessary. Although they have several ways of take you down, you will find that a wrestler will often break all the rules of wrestling in order to take a man down, because wrestling, unlike Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, is not technique based as much as it is objective based. Okay? To meet the objective. Okay? So, the truth is there. A wrestler doesn't need to know Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He needs to understand Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And if he understands what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artists need to pull off a particular submission, he will avoid those traps that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is so good at setting. He will avoid those traps and go on to ground and pound, or pick a man up and drop him on his head and knock him out when he does it. But he will continue, wrestling will continue by that means to produce, as it has been for 20 years, the greatest MMA fighters of all time in all organizations. Okay? So, my name is Safe Carmen. I present you facts in no-frills videos like this, knowledge that you will not get anywhere else. To those people who sent me your email, I will be posting a video, a separate video, talking to you about things I'm trying to do and things that I will be doing. I haven't forgotten you. You will be forever grateful that you shared your email with me, because there are things like my knife system, fighting system, that I will never post on YouTube, that you will get on my lessons platform. Okay, so there it is. The facts are out. I will continue to put the facts out. For 20 years, I've been saying that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu does not compare to mixed martial arts. That mixed martial arts, compare to wrestling. That wrestling is king of the cage. Art Davies' observation showed that many years ago, and I introduced you to Art Davies. Joe Rogan slipped up and even admitted himself, and that is this: that wrestlers, all they need to do is understand Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, not know Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. In my personal opinion, I think they should learn at least a little bit of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, at least roll with someone who is a good purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But if possible, if they can afford it, to get up to a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, preferably no gi. I don't think they should really be working in gi. I think it's, to a large degree, it's good for self-defense, but a waste of time if we're talking about MMA. I think that if there is a no-gi Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class, it would behoove a good high school wrestler who wants to go into MMA, or a college wrestler who wants to go into MMA, to join a good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school and enroll and train up until about blue belt, no gi, and then that's it. That's all he needs. And if he can find someone to take away from the school and meet a friend, or have a friend who can train with him in a garage or in the park, right, on the side, and roll with him, that's all he needs. To waste more time, to waste more money on purple belt, brown belt, black belt is not necessary to be a great, not good, a great MMA fighter. All right, so my name is Safe Carmen. This is Uma Fight Camp. See you next video.